The Montana wilderness, a realm of rugged peaks and sprawling forests, was particularly unforgiving in the heart of winter. It was a place where survival was a constant battle against the elements, a test of instinct, strength, and an unyielding will to endure. But on one fateful night, as a blizzard raged through the mountains, its icy breath whipping across the landscape, something extraordinary happened, a testament to the unexpected bonds that can form in the harshest of environments. A man and his daughter, miles from the sanctuary of their cabin, their path swallowed by the swirling snow, discovered they were not alone in their struggle against the storm. From the shadowy depths of the snow-laden pines, a small figure emerged, its movements hesitant yet determined, its presence a spark of life in the vast expanse of white. It was a tiny bobcat cub, barely clinging to life, its small body trembling with cold and exhaustion, its fur matted with snow, its eyes wide with a mixture of fear and desperate hope. It followed them through the deepening snow, step by trembling step, its tiny paws leaving faint tracks in the pristine surface, a testament to its desperate search for survival. What drove this wild creature, a creature of instinct and solitude, to seek their help? Was it the primal urge to survive, the overwhelming need for warmth and shelter? Or was there something more, a spark of trust that transcended the boundaries between species? And could they, two humans caught in the grip of a raging storm, burdened by their own vulnerability, possibly save this fragile life before the elements claimed them all? This is the incredible story of survival, a testament to the enduring power of compassion, a tale of trust that blossomed in the most unexpected of circumstances, and a journey that would irrevocably alter the course of their lives. But before we embark on this remarkable adventure, we invite you to hit the like button and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. And don't forget to hit that notification bell so you won't miss any of our new stories. Stories that celebrate the resilience of the human spirit and the remarkable connections we forge with the natural world. The January wind howled through the towering pine trees of the Montana wilderness, its icy breath carrying with it a flurry of snow that reduced visibility to mere feet. A blinding white curtain that obscured the familiar landscape. Mark Townsend, a seasoned outdoorsman, pulled his thick wool cap lower over his ears, his weathered hands adjusting the scarf that covered most of his face, a shield against the biting wind. At 53, he was no stranger to the brutal winters of the Northern Rockies, having spent most of his adult life in this remote corner of the Bitterroot Range, his body and spirit accustomed to the harsh realities of mountain living. His 12-year-old daughter, Emma, trudged beside him, her bright blue snowsuit a stark contrast against the monochrome landscape, a vibrant splash of color in a world of white. "How much farther, Dad?" Emma's voice, muffled by her scarf, was barely audible above the wind's relentless roar, a faint plea against the elements. "Just another mile to the ridge," Mark assured her, his voice calm and steady, his eyes scanning the horizon, his gloved hand checking his compass, a beacon of reliability in the swirling snow. "The view will be worth it, I promise." Emma had been eagerly anticipating this winter hike for weeks, her excitement growing with each passing day. Since her mother's passing 3 years ago, these father-daughter adventures had become their special ritual, a way to feel close to each other, to honor the memory of the one they had lost, and to connect with the natural world that Susan had so deeply cherished. The forecast had predicted clear skies, a perfect day for a winter hike, but mountain weather was notoriously unpredictable, its moods as fickle as the wind. The snowstorm had rolled in unexpectedly, about an hour into their journey, transforming their pleasant hike into a more challenging endeavor, a test of their resilience and resourcefulness. Mark wasn't overly concerned. They were well-equipped, experienced hikers, and their cabin, a haven of warmth and safety, was only 6 miles away. Still, caution was always wise in the mountains, especially when the weather turned against you. "Maybe we should head back," he suggested, his eyes noticing the telltale signs of fatigue on Emma's reddening cheeks, her youthful enthusiasm tempered by the harsh reality of the storm. "We can try for the ridge another day." Emma nodded reluctantly, her disappointment evident, but her trust in her father's judgment unwavering. She wasn't willing to argue against the obvious wisdom of his words, her own common sense echoing his concerns. They turned around, retracing their steps, adjusting their course to follow their own partially filled tracks back towards the cabin, a beacon of warmth and safety in the distance. They had been walking for about 20 minutes when Mark noticed something unusual, a subtle detail that caught his experienced eye. A small set of paw prints, fresh in the newly fallen snow, intersected with their path, a sign of another presence in this desolate landscape. They were too small for an adult predator, their delicate impressions a stark contrast to the heavy tracks of a wolf or a mountain lion, but they showed the distinctive pattern of a feline, their shape unmistakable to Mark's trained eye. The round pads and absence of claw marks told him it wasn't a canine, further narrowing down the possibilities. "Dad, look!" Emma's voice, filled with a mixture of curiosity and concern, broke through his contemplation. She pointed towards a cluster of snow-laden fir trees, their branches drooping under the weight of the storm, their dark silhouettes stark against the white expanse. Mark followed her gaze, his eyes scanning the shadows, searching for the source of the tracks, his senses heightened, his mind alert to the possibilities. Her gaze followed Emma's, and she spotted movement, a small, tawny creature stumbling through the deep snow. Its gait was unsteady, its head hanging low, a clear sign of exhaustion. "It's a bobcat," Mark said, his voice hushed with surprise, a mix of awe and concern. "A young one." "Is it hurt?" Emma asked, her voice filled with concern, her eyes fixed on the struggling animal. Mark shook his head, unsure of the extent of its injuries. "I'm not sure, but it's definitely struggling, probably separated from its mother in the storm." As they watched, the bobcat cub lifted its head, its small frame trembling, and let out a pitiful cry, a high-pitched mew that carried through the wintry air, a sound of desperation and vulnerability. Then, to their astonishment, it turned and began moving towards them, its movements slow and deliberate. "Stay still," Mark instructed Emma, his voice low and firm. "Wild animals, even young ones, can be unpredictable." The cub staggered forward, its small paws sinking into the deep snow, falling repeatedly, its struggle a testament to its weakened state. Its ribs were visible even through its thick winter coat, a stark reminder of its malnourishment, and its eyes were dull with exhaustion, their once bright sparkle dimmed by fatigue. Mark estimated it couldn't be more than 4 or 5 months old enough to have been weaned, but far too young to survive alone, especially in these harsh conditions. "Dad, it needs help," Emma whispered, tears forming in her eyes, her voice thick with emotion. "It's going to die out here." Mark knew she was right. Without its mother, and in this brutal storm, the young bobcat's chances were almost non-existent, its fate sealed by the unforgiving elements. Still, interfering with wildlife was something he'd always taught Emma to avoid, a respect for the delicate balance of nature. Nature had its own way, cruel as it sometimes seemed, a cycle of life and death that was beyond their control. But, as the cub stumbled again, its small body collapsing in the snow, looking directly at them with what seemed like a plea for help, an unspoken cry for salvation, Mark felt a tug at his heart, an undeniable pull of compassion. He couldn't ignore the cub's plight. Susan would have helped, he thought, her memory a guiding light in this moment of moral dilemma. Despite her deep respect for wild things, she would never have left a creature to suffer if she could prevent it. "Okay," he said finally, his voice laced with a mixture of resolve and caution. "But we need to be careful." He slowly removed his outer scarf, a thick, hand-knitted one that Susan had made for him years ago, a tangible reminder of her warmth and love. Approaching the cub with cautious steps, he spoke in a low, soothing voice. Though he knew the animal couldn't understand his words, his tone meant to convey reassurance and safety. "Easy there, little one. We're going to help you." The bobcat, Cub didn't flee, as Mark had half expected, a testament to its weakened state. Instead, it remained where it had fallen, too weak even to show fear, its body surrendering to exhaustion. With careful movements, Mark wrapped the scarf around the small body, lifting the cub gently, his touch light and reassuring. It weighed, far less than it should have, its small frame fragile and delicate, and he could feel the rapid, weak heartbeat against his hands, a frantic rhythm against the silence. "Is it going to be okay?" Emma asked, her voice trembling with anxiety, her eyes fixed on the bundled cub as her father returned. "I don't know, honey," Mark replied, his voice laced with concern. "It's in pretty bad shape." He tucked the bundle inside his jacket, close to his body, for added warmth, a makeshift incubator against the biting cold. "But we'll do what we can." The journey back to their cabin took on a new urgency. Their steps quickened, their determination fueled by the desire to save a life. The bobcat cub made no attempt to struggle against Mark's hold, a worrying sign of its weakened state. Wild animals, especially cats, typically fought against restraint with every ounce of their strength, their instincts driving them to resist. This one's compliance spoke volumes about its desperate condition, its surrender a testament to its exhaustion. By the time the outline of their cabin appeared through the swirling snow, a beacon of warmth and safety, Mark's arms ached from carrying the additional weight, his muscles strained from maintaining his pace. Emma rushed ahead, her footsteps light and quick, to open the door and stoke the fire that had been banked in the wood stove before their departure, a welcoming warmth against the biting cold. Inside the warm cabin, the air thick with the scent of wood smoke, Mark gently placed the scarf-wrapped bundle on the kitchen table, his movements tender and deliberate, careful not to cause any further distress. While Emma filled a hot water bottle, a simple yet effective source of warmth, they worked together to create a makeshift nest from an old wooden crate, lining it with soft blankets and placing it near the wood stove, where the warmth was strongest, a haven for the fragile cub. "What does it need, Dad?" Emma asked, her voice filled with concern, her eyes fixed on the still form of the cub, her heart aching for its suffering. Her face etched with concern, a delicate map of worry and compassion. Emma watched the barely moving form of the cub, her eyes tracing the faint rise and fall of its chest, each shallow breath a fragile testament to its will to survive. Mark, his brow furrowed in thought, considered the question carefully, weighing the gravity of their situation. He wasn't a wildlife rehabilitator, his expertise lay in the rugged rhythms of the mountains, but he had spent enough time around the local wildlife centre, observing their dedicated work, to know the basics of emergency care. First, warmth, a vital shield against the biting cold, then probably some food and water, carefully administered, not too much at once, to avoid overwhelming the cub's weakened system. He filled a small bowl with water, adding a pinch of salt and sugar, a simple rehydration solution he had learned about from one of the centre volunteers, a blend of electrolytes designed to replenish the cub's depleted reserves. "And we need to be prepared that it might not make it, Emma," he said gently, his voice laced with a somber realism. "It's pretty far gone." Emma's face, usually bright and full of youthful exuberance, set with a quiet determination, her eyes blazing with an unwavering belief. "It will make it," she insisted, her voice firm, her words a declaration of hope. "I know it will." Mark, recognizing the power of her unwavering optimism, didn't argue. Instead, he showed her how to use an eyedropper, a delicate instrument of care to offer tiny amounts of the rehydration solution to the weak cub, his movements precise and patient. At first, the bobcat wouldn't swallow, its throat too parched, its body too weak. But after several patient attempts, a testament to their unwavering dedication, it began to accept the liquid, its tongue lapping at the precious drops, a flicker of life returning to its weary eyes. As night fell, casting long shadows across the snow-covered landscape, and the storm continued to rage outside, its fury unabated, Mark and Emma took turns watching over their unexpected guest, their vigil a silent promise of care. Mark made a few calls on their satellite phone, a lifeline to the outside world, to the nearest wildlife rehabilitation center, seeking guidance and assistance. But the storm had closed all the roads, isolating them in their mountain sanctuary. They were on their own, at least for the next few days, their fate intertwined with the fragile life they were trying to save. "What should we call it?" Emma asked, her voice soft, her eyes fixed on the cub, as she sat cross-legged on the floor, beside the crate, watching the steady rise and fall of the cub's breathing, each breath a victory against the odds. "Emma, we shouldn't name it," Mark cautioned, his voice gentle but firm. "Remember, it's not a pet. If it survives, it needs to go back to the wild." Emma nodded, her understanding evident, but her expression remained thoughtful, her mind grappling with the emotional complexities of their situation. "I know, Dad, but it needs a name while it's with us," she reasoned, her voice a plea. "How about Ash? Because its fur is kind of that color, and because we found it when it was almost, gone, like ashes." Mark smiled, a warm expression that softened the lines of worry on his face. Despite himself, he was touched by her sentiment. Ash it is then. Throughout that long night, they continued their vigil, their dedication unwavering, their hope flickering like the flames in the wood stove. By morning, to Mark's surprise, a testament to their tireless efforts, the cub was still alive, its small body a beacon of resilience. Not only alive, but showing small signs of improvement. Its eyes were clearer, their once dull glaze replaced by a spark of life, and it had started to make weak attempts to clean its fur, a good sign in cats of any kind, a sign of returning strength. The storm lasted for 3 days, its relentless fury confining them to their cabin, during which time their small sanctuary became a makeshift wildlife hospital, a haven for their fragile charge. Mark fashioned a feeding bottle from supplies in their first aid kit, improvising with the resourcefulness of a seasoned outdoorsman, and they offered the cub small amounts of a mixture of egg and milk, along with tiny pieces of the venison and jerky they had packed for their hike, providing the nourishment it desperately needed. By the 4th day, when the storm finally broke, its icy grip loosening, Ash had gained enough strength to stand and explore the confines of the crate, his movements tentative but determined, his spirit rekindled. His true personality began to emerge, a blend of curiosity, surprising gentleness, and flashes of the wild spirit that was his birthright, a reminder of his untamed origins. "We need to get him to the wildlife center now that the roads are clearing," Mark told Emma over breakfast, his voice filled with a sense of responsibility. "They'll know how to properly rehabilitate him for release." Emma's face fell, her eyes clouding with disappointment, her heart aching at the thought of parting with their beloved charge. "Can't we keep him just a little longer? He's getting better with us." Mark sighed, understanding her attachment, her emotional bond with the cub, but concerned about doing what was best for the young bobcat, ensuring its successful return to the wild. "Let me make another call." The conversation with the Wildlife Center's director surprised him, a twist of fate that offered a glimmer of hope. Due to the severe winter and multiple rescues after the storm, they were at capacity, their resources stretched thin. When Mark described the cub's condition and the care they had been providing, the director suggested they continue as they were for a few more weeks, with guidance from the center staff over the phone, a testament to their trust in Mark and Emma's dedication. "They want us to keep him?" Emma asked, her eyes lighting up with joy, her face radiant with happiness when Mark relayed the news. "Just temporarily," Mark emphasized, his voice a gentle reminder of their ultimate goal, "until they have space, or until he's strong enough, to be released back near where we found him. And we need to be very careful not to let him get too used to humans. He needs to remember he's wild." Emma nodded solemnly, her understanding evident, but her excitement was palpable, her heart overflowing with joy. "I'll be careful, Dad, I promise." The weeks that followed were transformative for all of them, a period of growth and healing, a testament to the power of compassion. Ash grew stronger daily, his coat regaining its luster, its once dull fur now gleaming with health, and his movements, becoming more coordinated and powerful, a reflection of his restored vitality. They moved him from the crate to a larger enclosure that Mark built in a corner of their covered porch, a space that bridged the gap between their cozy cabin and the untamed wilderness, allowing the bobcat to experience the fluctuating outdoor temperatures and the rich tapestry of forest smells while still being protected from the harshest elements. Following the rehabilitation center's meticulous advice, they minimized their direct contact with Ash, recognizing the importance of fostering his independence and preparing him for his return to the wild. Though Emma found it exceedingly difficult not to sit near his enclosure, her heart aching for connection, she often found herself reading her beloved books aloud, her voice a gentle murmur in the crisp air. I know. Assignments inside, he noticed movement at the forest's edge, a subtle shift in the shadows that caught his experienced eye. There, sitting calmly in the dappled sunlight filtering through the trees, was Ash, the bobcat they had nurtured, back to health. He looked different somehow, more muscular, more alert, his coat blending perfectly with the forest shadows, a testament to his return to his natural habitat. He watched Mark with bright, intelligent eyes that no longer held the dependency of his kittenhood, but rather a quiet confidence, a knowing gaze that spoke of his newfound independence. Emma, Mark called softly toward the open window, his voice laced with a mixture of awe and anticipation. Come here, slowly. Emma appeared on the porch, her expression transforming from curiosity to joy when she spotted Ash, her eyes widening, with delight. He came back, she exclaimed, her voice a hushed whisper, her heart swelling with emotion. Don't approach him, Mark cautioned, his voice gentle but firm. Let him come to us, if he wants to. They stood together, hardly breathing, their bodies tense with anticipation, as Ash considered them from his position at the forest's edge, his gaze fixed on them, his senses heightened. Then, with deliberate steps, his movements fluid and graceful, the bobcat crossed the clearing, his paws barely disturbing the fallen leaves. He stopped a few feet away, regarding them with what seemed like recognition, a flicker of familiarity in his eyes, but also a new wariness, a sense of distance that spoke of his transformation. Emma slowly knelt, her movements gentle and reassuring, extending her hand, palm down, in the greeting they had always used, a gesture of friendship and trust. For a long moment, Ash remained still, his body tense, his gaze fixed on her outstretched hand, as if weighing the risks and rewards of this encounter. Then, with a soft rumble in his throat, he moved forward, briefly pressing his head against her hand, a fleeting touch of affection, before stepping back, his movements cautious but deliberate. He repeated the gesture with Mark, a rumbling purr vibrating from his chest, a sound of contentment and recognition. He remembers us, Emma whispered, tears streaming down her face, her voice thick with emotion, her heart overflowing with joy. Yes, Mark agreed, his own voice thick with emotion, his eyes glistening with tears. But he's saying goodbye, I think. As if confirming his words, Ash turned and trotted back toward the forest, his movements fluid and graceful, his powerful form a testament to his restored vitality. At the edge, he paused for one last look back, his silhouette a striking image against the green backdrop of the forest, his tufted ears twitching, his senses alert. Then, with a flick of his tufted ears, a final farewell, he disappeared into the undergrowth, melting into the shadows, becoming one with the wilderness. Emma leaned against her father, her body trembling with a mixture of sadness and something else, something like pride, a quiet satisfaction in knowing they had done the right thing. He's really wild now, isn't he? She asked, her voice soft, her eyes filled with a newfound understanding. He always was, Mark said gently, his voice laced with affection. We just helped him find his way back to it. Over the years that followed, they occasionally caught glimpses of a bobcat in the forest around their cabin, a fleeting shadow in the trees, a glimpse of tawny fur in the undergrowth. They could never be certain it was Ash. But Emma liked to think it was, imagining him fully grown and thriving in the wilderness that was his true home, his rightful place in the world. On Emma's 16th birthday, Mark presented her with a special gift, a carved wooden bobcat, its features capturing that same determined spirit they had seen in Ash, a symbol of their shared journey. "To remind you," he said, as she turned the carving in her hands, her eyes filled with gratitude, "that sometimes the greatest love we can show is in letting go." Emma placed the carving on her windowsill, where the morning light would catch it. Each day, a constant reminder of the bobcat they had saved and the lesson they had learned. "I think Mom would have been proud of how we helped him," she said softly, her voice filled with a quiet sense of satisfaction. Mark smiled, thinking of Susan and her boundless compassion for all living things, her unwavering belief in the power of kindness. "She would have been proud of you, Emma," he said, his voice laced with affection, "your compassion, your strength, and your wisdom and understanding when it was time to say goodbye." Outside, as twilight settled over the Montana wilderness, casting long shadows across the landscape, a bobcat's cry echoed through the trees, a wild, free sound, a testament to the enduring spirit of the wilderness, and a reminder that Ash was exactly where he belonged.